The COVID-19 pandemic caused team sports around the world to be postponed. COVID-19 is caused by SARS-CoV-2 and transmitted from human to human by multiple ways. Even without considering the risk of crowds, the close proximity of participants and increased respiration rate due to the demands of exercise poses a potential risk for human-to-human transmission during team sports. Participants were male professional rugby league players. 36 matches were played during the observational period, that is from THE1 July until THE4 October 2020. Each match directly involves 34 players, 17 on each team, 13 starting and 4 as interchange, 1 on-field match official and 2 touch judges. All participants were within 7-day RT-PCR screening cycle and returned a negative test within the 7 days prior to the match. Players subsequently testing positive for COVID were deemed at risk of shedding infectious virus during a match when the symptom onset or the test occurred within 48 hours of a match. Identification of COVID-19 positive players. Players undertook weekly RT-PCR testing and daily COVID-19 symptom monitoring. If a player returned a positive test, their respective cycle threshold values were available for each gene. Players' symptoms were monitored by their team physician. The monitoring covered all typical COVID-19 symptoms, for example, cough, fever, smell and taste disturbances and difficulties in breathing. Identification of increased risk contacts. If a player returned a positive COVID screening test or developed symptoms consistent with COVID-19 within 48 hours of a match and had a subsequent positive COVID test, it was presumed the player was potentially shedding infectious virus during the match and increased risk contacts were then identified. This included players on the same and opposing team. Between kickoff and full time, any player from the match who was within 1 meter, face-to-face for 3 seconds was deemed an increased risk contact and consequently required to isolate for 14 days in accordance with Public Health England guidance at that time. Match statistics for COVID-19 positive players. Tackle involvements, as either a ball carrier or tackler, were provided by a commercial match statistics provider. WHO analysed the match video footage. Video footage of the match was then analysed by an experienced performance analyst to identify tackles involving COVID-19 positive players. Tackles and ball carries were reviewed numerous times in slow motion to determine which tackles involved a meter, face-to-face interaction for 3 seconds with another player. Any interactions that were thought to be possible increased risk contacts were included. Of the 36 rugby league matches, there were 4 matches in which 8 players from 4 teams subsequently tested positive for COVID-19 either during routine RT-PCR screening or following the development of symptoms within 48 hours of a match. Consequently, contact tracing was carried out on 4 Super League matches, identifying 28 players as increased risk contacts that were required to isolate for 14 days from exposure. Positive cases and identified increased risk contacts varied, 5 positive cases and 12 increased risk contacts, Match 1, 1 positive case and 3 increased risk contacts, Match 2, 1 positive case and 9 increased risk contacts, Match 3, and 1 positive case and 4 increased risk contacts, Match 4. Positive player test characteristics and symptoms. The positive RT-PCR test characteristics were available, and the timing of development of symptoms in relation to the match are shown in the figure. 2 players developed COVID-19 symptoms prior, 3 on the day and 2 on the following day. Interaction between positive players and other players during a match. Positive players and their interactions with other players during the match are shown in the figures. Identified increased risk contact tackles were and no player had multiple increased risk contact tackles with the same player. Based on the match statistics, increased risk contacts and other players were involved in 11.4 and 4.0 tackles with the positive players, respectively. Based on the GPS data analysis, increased risk contacts and other players were within 2 meters for 3 seconds with positive players on 10.4 and 12.5 occasions. The figure shows the cumulative duration of time and number interactions between positive players and identified increased risk for different dwell times based on the GPS data analysis. Interactions were typically 5 seconds. 63% of all interactions were 3 seconds. Testing and symptom monitoring of increased risk contacts. During the 14 days isolation period, increased risk contacts completed their normal daily self-report screen of potential COVID-19 symptoms and had 1 to 4 RT-PCR tests. During this period of observation, C1 tested positive on day 6 of isolation, whereas all other increased risk contacts returned negative. Out of the other 100 players participating in the matches with positive players, 5 players returned screening results and 95 players returned negative screening results over the 14 days following their matches.